Hello everyone, and welcome to the third panel of the first edition of LebanonTalks. On August 4, a massive explosion in the port of Beirut rocked the city, killing more than 200 people, wounding more than 6,000, and displacing around 300,000 people. The explosion destroyed the country's largest port and the city's dense residential and commercial areas. As per Beirut Rapid Damage and Need Assessment Report issued in August 2020, we have between 3.8 and 4.6 billion dollars of physical damages, 2.9 to 3.5 billion dollars of losses in economic flows, in addition to higher hyperinflation rates and higher poverty rates. Today, we are going to discuss how can we build an innovative post-disaster recovery framework in the current circumstances, and what would be the role of the diaspora and the international community? Thank you all for joining, and I'm really honored to have with us today a distinguished panel of experts who are going to share with us their inputs and experience on this different topic. So I would like to welcome first Dr. Carmen Geha. Dr. Carmen is an associate professor of public administration at AUB, research associate and founding member at the Center for Inclusive Business and Leadership for Women, CIBL, and co-founder of Khadid Beirut. Thank you, Dr. Geha, for joining. Professor Ishac Diwan from Paris, professor of economics at Paris Sciences et Lettres and at École Normale Supérieure. Dr. Diwan is also chair of the economy of the Arab world. Also, thank you, Dr. Diwan, for joining us. Mrs. Lamia Moubayed is the head of the Institut des Finances Basr Flayhan at the Lebanese Ministry of Finance. Thank you, Mrs. Moubayed, for joining us. We will have a long discussion regarding the governmental intervention in the recovery process. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Mr. Elie Geagea. He will be supporting us with all his financial engineering expertise. Thank you so much, Mr. Geagea, for joining us. So before starting this discussion, I would like to ask Professor Diwan if he can help us to set a proper framework for our discussion, or what are we going to face as different phases in the upcoming years post-blast.
Okay, so we want to think about the challenges of rebuilding Beirut. But let me make a few points to try to structure the discussion. First of all, we have to remember that the country is in an incredible crisis, political, financial.
Sorry, Professor Ishac, we can't hear you at all.
Okay, is this better? So I wanted to start by reminding us of the overall situation in Lebanon, a profound economic and financial crisis, a profound political crisis. You can still not hear me.
I asked the technical team in Paris.
Technical team in Paris.
We can't hear Professor Ishac.
You're okay? No. Okay, just a few seconds.
Yes.
You're okay now?
Yes, now it's fine.
Very good. All right. So I wanted to start by painting the broader picture of the situation in the country, a very deep economic, financial crisis, a very deep political crisis, the health crisis. And it's really in this environment that we had this dramatic blast in the port. The discussion this morning, I think, really showed the tension between the time frames through which one can solve these different crises. The short urgency of solving the economic crisis, the fact that the political resolution, finding a system that really meets the aspiration of the country, is going to take longer, and the contradiction this creates. So how to deal with the short-term economic financial crisis that is impoverishing most of the country? Can we rely on a government that cannot be trusted, that led to the situation in which we are, to solve the situation? So this is a big contradiction that runs through these discussions this morning. This contradiction exists also when we talk about Beirut, but to a lesser extent. The contradiction is there because the whole zone is exploded. Some people don't have where to live. People lost their jobs, cannot feed themselves, have been impoverished. And so there's an urgency to bring relief and to start rebuilding very quickly. And yet, as we saw in the introduction, rebuilding Beirut, the downtown as a whole, will cost at least $5 billion, perhaps more, and cannot be done in the current circumstances. It needs more planning. We don't want to build another Solidaire. How do we get organized? What's the urban view? How do we have better governance, hopefully a better political system when this is rebuilt, the role of the port, how it's better integrated in the city? There are many questions that needs thinking, and mostly there is a need for massive financing, which cannot be attracted in the current circumstances. So it has to also await until the beginning of the resolution of the crisis. So when we think of the time frame, there is the immediate term, and that tension, which is really frustrating to people. The economic crisis is there, they can do nothing about it, really showed up in the way, this amazing solidarity that we observed in Beirut during the short term. Here people could do something. They could go down in the street, clean up, distribute food, work together, and we saw this amazing solidarity and organization and dynamism in civil society and in the diaspora in the immediate term. In the long term, this is going to take more organization, including a recovery plan and maybe new elections before this can happen. And then there is this intermediate period between now and, say, in the best of circumstances, early 2022. So 2020, 2021. This is the intermediate period where actually things can happen. Things can happen because, unlike the economic situation, people here, civil society groups, are empowered to do something. This could be taken, for now, outside the domain of the political. It's not about distributing the financial losses, about rebuilding Beirut. President Macron helped depoliticize that by putting on the feuille de route the fact that the aid will go directly to the people. These magical words mean the people can get organized with the international organization, with external support, to do something during these two years. Now, this is something between relief and long-term rebuilding. Let's call it rehabilitation. What it is remains to be defined. But the World Bank EU report on the assessments put what's feasible, what should be done in those 2 years at close to $2 billion. I don't see really potential to raise this much money from abroad in the current circumstances. I mean, let's remember that Yemen, with its famine, was only able to raise close to $1 billion for 2020, while in 2019 it had raised 3 or 4 times more. So, budgets all around the world are very tight. To get grants for Lebanon, I think we'll have to be a bit more modest, but the space is there. The international organizations have started to work together to create a legal structure. Let's call it the Beirut Fund, a multi-donor trust fund, a legal entity. And the challenge here is to create a governance structure that reflects what the people want, how to get civil society organized to make decisions in terms of priorities, in terms of how to do things that go beyond the quick relief energy that was somewhat disorganized, so a more organized entity, that have execution very much by CSOs and civil society organizations, which, in what capacity, how, and finally that has checks and balances that are also done by groups in civil societies to make sure that money is well spent, that there is no corruption, that there is transparency, that priorities are being respected and the like. And so really this is a challenge. It's a challenge for all these actors to come together. There is space for it. And they will have to invent solutions. We didn't have space like this in the past. They have to learn how to work with each other, how to discipline the international organizations who are respecting their rules, also how to work with government when needed to reform some institution, the cadastre, Beirut, the port, and others, and how to also work with the diaspora that has been very supportive from the actions from the beginning. And in doing so, it will not only rescue Beirut, but it will also invent solutions for the resolution of the larger problems of Lebanon, how civil society and government can work together in order to have more discipline, less corruption, more transparency, more democracy in every action. So it's also a school for the future. And we want to try to, I think, paint the various challenges of this coming period in this panel. So I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Dr. Diwan. If I can go to Dr. Carmen. Dr. Diwan told us that things can happen and there is an important role for the civil society groups, but we should learn how to work together with the government. So I have two questions. First, are the civil society groups today an alternative to the Lebanese institutions? And my second question, how would be the different, how do you perceive this different approach between the different components of the civil society groups, like from between NGOs, individual initiatives, and professional syndicates? Sorry, like they are big questions. But.
Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here today, and I'm happy to answer these questions in light of what Ishac said, a school for the future. Can Beirut be a school for the future? Can we break the cycle? I believe that we can, and many people believe that we can. But let's identify, what is it that we're dealing with right now in Beirut? The local context that Ishac talked about also is made worse by a lack of trust in state institutions, a lack of trust in civil society, a lack of trust in each other, and really a huge devastating loss. What would it take to create from Beirut a school for the future that would inspire Lebanon, but perhaps as well disaster zones elsewhere? This question has kept me and many of us in Khaddat Beirut unable to sleep for the last 70 days or so. Looking at contexts that are similar, I'm paranoid that aid can contribute to exacerbate local inequalities and local tensions. Aid in places like Afghanistan and Iraq contributes to even violent conflict. Political narratives around scarcity when there is disaster fuel tension. Can we avoid this model? I have a couple of ideas for the trust fund that Ishac mentioned about how is it that we can work better together, but also how is it that we can break this cycle. One note on civil society and one note on the state. First of all, of course, there is no alternative for the state. The state provides scale, policy, and trust. At the same time, what do our state institutions suffer from today? A data deficit, not just in generalities, but a data deficit that is disaggregated by gender and class and chronic illnesses and so on and so forth. Like I said, a lack of public trust, in many places, a lack of competence, and a lack of equitable service delivery. So the state becomes a stakeholder rather than a neutral provider. My suggestion is to try to create a school out of this. One, and I know that this is up Lamia's alley and experience, can we create a network of competent civil servants that are able to administer aid programs? They don't have to make policy decisions or large strategies, but they would be entrusted to administer programs that the fund and that citizens will be coming up with. Second, we need to enact a whistleblower protection law to protect these civil servants. And third, we need to reform the access to information law to include parliamentary deliberations as well as those of cabinet. That will ensure greater transparency. On the role of civil society, this is how we're testing. Khadat Beirut is one out of probably 1 million attempts to try to figure out how we can create an inclusive, evidence-based, locally driven roadmap for recovery. And we realize that it's not rocket science. It starts with establishing the data that is completely absent at the central level, engaging the community, piloting solutions, implementing these solutions, then scaling up to the state level, to the nation, and perhaps for the world. Why can't Beirut's political system be a lesson as to how not to do power sharing? But can we not only be a cautionary tale? Can Beirut be a lesson for once in our lives of what is it that we can do correctly to help inspire disaster in other contexts? I'll close on the issue of civil society. Of course, by definition, civil society works with the state. What civil society is called to do right now is complicated and requires conversation, because civil society will have to balance between the following issues in the trust fund. So we battle with representativeness, right, and inclusion of people versus organizations. Civil society is a typology. Some are NGOs, service delivery, unions. They each perform a function in society. But how do we make sure that these associations that are professional, transparent, are also representative of people? In doing so, how can we include the voice of the most vulnerable and marginalized in the trust fund? Second, what's important to have is to have civil society expertise. In Lebanon, there are people that know how to do data analysis and gender issues. How can we get experts who are not necessarily the most representative people on the table? And thirdly, the third criteria, how can we get people that are free, that are independent, who can blow the whistle, who are on no political or politician's payroll? I think if we can balance among these criteria of representation, expertise, and freedom, let's say, we can also balance the functions that these people, it has to be a group of people, cannot be one person, would do at the trust fund, which is one, community inclusion. So making sure that the data that's coming out from people and people's grievances is taken to the decision-making spheres where programs and decisions are being made. So one function is community inclusion. The second is feedback, because this is going to be a long process of recovery, if any at all. So how can we loop back the community into giving feedback all the time to the government, to top decision makers, but also to civil society? There's a third function, which is technical input, which is probably the easiest because we have a lot of technical expertise. We also have passion. International agencies will not be more concerned about corruption than we citizens are. And the last function among this group of people would be oversight that they can do collectively. So these are my initial ideas. Happy to discuss.
Sorry, one last question. You talked about the expertise of the civil society. What's the difference today between a local established NGO, an international NGO? I know you don't like this term, but the independent grassroots initiative that started on August 4th, and the syndicates, the professional syndicates. Like for you, how do you perceive the different approach that each of these components are following after the crisis?
Yeah, no, I think what I was trying to say is that there is a typology of functions that these groups perform in society. Yani union's role is representation and advocacy. Local NGOs might be relief, might be protection, might be lobbying. It depends the role that they play. International organizations bring programs and standards. So it's a typology. It's not who is better than the other, right? It's like a different functions in society. But on the international organizations, we've looked at contexts of disaster elsewhere. We've collected lessons learned. We were told verbatim, there is no roadmap to import because there was never an explosion with financial collapse, with political upheaval that Ishac referred to, with a pandemic. So it's something that we're going to create all together. And I think, John, we can engage the entire spectrum of civil society from the loosely organized to the most professional ones.
Thank you. If I might ask Mrs. Lamia, like now in Lebanon with the rampant corruption and accumulated failures of state agencies, this have encouraged an adversarial position among activist groups who demand the exclusion of the state from the reconstruction. So how do you think the civil society / public sector partnerships, are they able to foster state effectiveness?
Well, Thank you for this question.
Or how this sector, sorry, but or how this sector can become more transparent, accountable, responsible, and trustworthy.
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying that you're asking this question to a person who has spent the last 17 years of its professional life working at reinforcing state institutions. So I'm quite biased, although I come from a UNish background. But this is quite a challenging position right now, especially in the last events that happened. We've been part of many discussions on questioning the relationship between aid, governance, and public sector. And understandably, many Lebanese and international have a low degree of trust and prefer, of course, that donations, aid, and effort go to the beneficiary. I mean, as Ishac mentioned, the people-centered approach. Well, let me start by saying this is again understandable. However, a reminder to all that what happened at the port is a function of a total collapse, not only the state collapse, but it's a societal collapse. Because also, let us remember that private sector and the Lebanese people have tolerated a very low level of standards, of norms, of management, and have been in many instances also accomplices. So it is a whole of society collapse, not only a governmental collapse. And we should seize this this moment to rethink about the way we do our work, the way we recruit people at government, the way we elect also our representatives. And this is a more profound than just, blaming the state and putting it on the state alone. It's just a simple image. The replacement to low governance or bad governance cannot be zero government, cannot be an NGOizing the society. I mean, to the opposition of the port, we have the example of Rafiq Hariri Hospital, and it demonstrated quite well the importance of having public hospitals at the forefront of a crisis such as COVID. So let us have a balanced look about that. I know perfectly well that this rhetoric of leaving or excluding government institutions from the recovery pay is very popular in Lebanon among activists, as you well said. But there is a limit, and there is also a risk. First of all, this is a little bit, in my view, unfair, unfounded, and certainly self-serving, because this rhetoric has found its way to donors and to international NGOs, and it's quite risky. Carmen rightly mentioned the experiences of Afghanistan. We have Haiti, we have Iraq. And let us not forget that this experience there, the evidence there is very telling. This approach made society also destabilized the society, made it hostage of certain groups. And we are in a region where NGOs are mostly affiliated. I mean, there are very few unaffiliated NGOs. So, and it certainly did a lot of harm to state building. So the quest here is let's go back to the essential. And if we want to talk about sustainability and peace building sustainably and getting out of the cycle of collapse sustainably, there is no alternative but to build good governance. And this starts with state building. So society, in a sense, is there is. Let me say that yes, a policy of positive engagement should start a discourse on positive engagement with state institutions, a pact of good governance with results, with milestones and deliverables need to be put up front. Beirut can become a lesson. Yes, Carmen, it can become a lesson. We need that. We need that also for the future of Lebanon, to keep people in the country. And we need certainly two things to be able to make this real. First of all, to adapt the financing instruments of the aid and whatever money is coming to Lebanon to sustain this vision. And here there is some evolution that we need to do in the thinking about aid and about institution strengthening in context of state collapse. Financing instruments are not available at the time being, but we need to push the donor institutions to rethink their instrument in similar context. We've had many conversations with AFD and with the World Bank on that in particular. And the second pillar, is certainly digital government. Investing in digital government, because this will allow the levers for transparency, for accountability to happen. And I invite everybody to look at two very, very interesting experiences today in Beirut. The first is the donor coordination platform set up to put up more transparency on aid disbursement. And you can just go find it on the internet. A push towards more aid tracking and aid transparency. And the second is another platform called Impact, and impact.gov.lb is to become a whole of government platform, but certainly an intermunicipal platform. The third, maybe sometimes, and I'll stop there, this third axe or pillar that we forget is municipalities. We've talked about people-centered, but the institutions who are the closest to people are municipalities. We all focus on Beirut, but we forget Bush Hamoud and Karantina. And these people are at the front line of helping in the recovery and rehabilitation phase. And they deserve to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moubayed. Mr. Geagea, Dr. Moubayed talked about how to adapt the financing instrument. What is your perception? How can we become innovative within the crisis in order to channel the money in a more transparent way? Let's start first. How are we going to channel the money within the crisis we're witnessing? And second, how this money channeling can become something innovative that we can build on for the upcoming future.
Okay, hi John. Good morning everybody. Good afternoon for the ones who are following us on Zoom, and thanks for joining. So if we will be talking about innovative solution, diaspora, yes, can contribute in proposing some innovation. Why? Simply because diaspora is exposed to different experiences and solutions that we might find in Lebanon. And by innovation doesn't necessarily mean the solution reinvention that Ishac mentioned, but it's just picking some solution that proved to be successful abroad and that we can reshape and implemented it into the Lebanese market. I will be talking about mainly two financial solutions that we can adapt. But before, let's start to understand the problems that we will be trying to address. First, the cash economy. The economical crisis in Lebanon transformed the economy in Lebanon into a pure cash economy, where we can buy a piece of bread or a piece of land using cash. It's totally an outdated model.
Sorry, Mr. Geagea, for interrupting. But is it possible to improve the sound quality? Because many of the participants are asking. It seems there is a sound problem in Paris.
Is it better now? Yeah, I believe yes. Okay. So I will not repeat everything, but I was saying that innovation is not necessarily recreation. We can reuse some solutions that prove to be successful abroad and reshape it for the Lebanese market. So before talking about solution, let's understand what are the problems that we are trying to solve in Lebanon. First is the cash economy. The economical crisis in Lebanon transformed the economy into a full cash economy in Lebanon, where you can buy a piece of bread or a piece of land using cash, and it's totally an outdated model with a lot of disadvantages, like fiscal evasion. It's perfect for money laundering. It's not good for spending and economic growth, and so on and so on. Second, we have a cash out crisis, meaning that people who have money in the banks, they don't have an easy access to it. even people who are ready to sacrifice 50% haircut on their USD accounts, they have limited amount of money that they can withdraw on a weekly or a monthly basis. Same thing we have witnessed this week. There have been some more limitation withdrawal on the Lebanese pound as well. Third, money doesn't circulate easily within the banking system in Lebanon. Fourth, we have a lot of issues whenever we want to transfer money on an international basis in and out. In some cases, it was more easy to raise funds here abroad than to deliver money to the real people that needs it in Lebanon. So the idea to propose is to create an e-wallet platform. It's like Revolut, it's like PayPal wallet, it's like Paylib, whatever. But the problem is that all these platforms are not operational for the Lebanese market, either because it's a small market, it's a choice of these platforms not to operate in Lebanon, or they found the country so risky and so complicated. So the idea is to create a Lebanese version of this e-wallet. Let's name it e-Khazne, and let's see how it can work. I will take the example of the Western Union. For the Western Union, I can create an account in 5 minutes, even without having a banking account. I can put money in Western Union. If I send it to you, John, you will be able to receive it within seconds, even if you live on the other corner of the globe. So let's replace now the Western Union by the e-Khazne. I will put money. I will deliver it to you. I will send it to you. But you, instead of cashing it out, you will put it into your e-Khazne account. And now if Lamia, Ishac, and Carmen, within 5 minutes, they will create their own e-Khazne accounts. We can easily circulate the money among us really in real time, and without needing to have a cash. And even if you are sitting in Beirut and we are sitting in Paris. So this addresses several issues. No need. It's less cash. It's so quick. It's real time. And it can go international. And we're not talking here about only small amounts. I will take the example of Revolut. Revolut, they have limitations. For example, the limitation they fix on their transaction, it's 250,000 pounds. Thank you. So the Revolut limitation, it's 250,000 pounds. Of course, it's British pounds, not Lebanese pounds, per transaction, 500,000 per day, and up to 5 million per week. So, of course, we won't be targeting the Revolut thresholds, but what I mean is that we can build a platform that can suit the business transaction and even international transfers. So this is one topic. Another observation that we might have in Lebanon is that up to February 2020, because I don't have updates after this date, there were equivalent of 40 billion US dollars, but in Lebanese pound deposits. Of course, it's based on the official rate, so it's equivalent of, I don't know, 15 billion dollar or 8 billion real dollars. All these Lebanese amounts are sitting within banking accounts with roughly zero interest rate. You have other part of the people in Lebanon who has Lebanese pounds sitting under their beds, under their sofa, so with zero return, and the Lebanese pound is depreciating on a daily basis. This is on one hand. On the other hand, you have a lot of Lebanese people who own small businesses who are in desperate need of cash, but they don't have access to the money market. Why? Simply why? Because this, as Lamia mentioned, the financial sector or the financial business is totally unoperational in Lebanon for financing projects. So, if I will sum up, so you have money, you have people who have cash but with zero return on them, and the value is depreciating. On the other hand, you have people who need cash to rebuild their small businesses and be operational. And within the two, there's no banking system. What's happening on the ground now? We are witnessing on the black market a peer-to-peer, a customer-to-customer, client-to-customer loan. I was watching the TV 2 days ago. They were talking about peer-to-peer loans where interest rates go up to 10% on a monthly basis, which means 120% return on an annual basis. It's so abusive, and it's taking how to say, it's profiting from the condition of desperate people. So the idea is to build a platform for microloans where we can link peer-to-peer, customer-to-customer, client-to-client, where the people who have money, they can finance micro projects so that people who have own businesses like a bakery, small restaurant, pharmacy, whatever, they can stand up on their feet again and be operational again. And just to mention a small successful example on this regard, there's a company called Mintos that was founded in 2015 but went operational roughly in 2017. It's based in Latvia, which is a small northeastern European country with 2 million population and a GDP of 65 billion. This platform managed to give loans up to $6 billion, lending up to 25 million mini projects. And just for comparison, $6 billion is like 10% of the 60 billion loans that we have to our private sector in Lebanon that is given by roughly 100 financial institutions. So it's not a small bunch of money. But I'm saying that solutions are here. It's all about that taking these solutions and implementing them into the Lebanese framework.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Geagea. We talked about how to channel the money, but excuse my naivety. I have a basic question for Professor Ishac. Who is going to lend us all this money for the reconstruction? Like, until now, we received a small amount. I don't have the amount right now, but it's nothing compared to what we need. Who is going to lend us all this money? What are the prospects for such money lending or money support?
Nobody's gonna lend us the money for a while until we have a stabilization plan, we reduce our debt, we clean up our financial system. Even the private sector, as Elie was telling us, cannot really send money now. They have to send banknote dollars because the banking system is not working. So what has happened so far is the first donors conference in Paris raised supposedly close to $300 million to be disbursed through the UN agencies. My understanding is that 50 or 60 of those only have been put together and are in the process of being disbursed. We don't know the exact amount, but the diaspora and the Lebanese people have mobilized and have been very active through NGOs on the ground, and this must be in the tens of thousands of dollars, distributing relief, food, housing, rehabilitating building, fixing schools, hospitals. Some major efforts have been done, but that needs to be more organized to make sure that quarantinas and the poorer areas and the rehab is done in the right way, and there is no corruption with some people or some groups being able to double dip. And we have to think of how to help the private sector. 2,000-3,000 businesses are with potential. We need them for the future, but they don't have access to credit, let alone to funds to repair their businesses, you know, whether it's a clinic or a store or a production factory. So the promise is that as soon as there is a new government, or with or without, there is a lot of uncertainty, there will be another donor conference in Paris to raise funds for the rehab phase, which the donors cost at close to $2 billion. My own guess is that we would raise another 200, 300, 400, 500 million max. And that is pretty much what we could get in grants until there is some kind of deal with the IMF when we can get more seriously on the road to recovery. And on the road to being able to attract potentially FDI and support from the diaspora again.
Thank you. Dr. Geha, how the civil society organizations are going to make sure that there is no political interference with the money that we're getting? At least let's talk about the 500 million that Professor Ishac has mentioned. Like, we know what happened in 2006 in the reconstruction phase. How to avoid something similar to happen again?
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear, look at what we're dealing with. We don't even have a registry of how much money came in. When I talk about a data deficit, it means this is a serious data deficit. I want to know, of all the field hospitals and the medicine that was given out, how much of that actually matched patient needs. We are in a really deep crisis. To be very clear with the audience, I don't work at an NGO. What I can tell you as an activist, what we need to be doing is demanding that there are state policies. Since 1996, UMSAD has been working on an e-government platform and the digitization of services. What state does is not administer aid and ask for money. In fact, a lot of the businesses that we talk to in the affected areas say, "No, we don't want aid. We want policies, e-transaction, right? E-signature, digitization, registries. We want to open up the economy. We want stability so we can attract customers." The challenges that Elie mentioned about the sending of money, the challenge and the crisis of trust, I mean, this is a real problem on the ground, and it means that tens and thousands of families are going to slip into deeper poverty. A lot of people can't even afford to put their kids in public school because they can't pay for the bus, or they probably don't have internet and laptops at home. This is serious. What civil society, all of it can do, I cannot speak. What I will do, I'll repeat the reforms we need. E-signature, e-government, digitization, not only of governmental data, but of services, health, education, environment. We need a whistleblower protection. As an activist, I would like to ask everybody in the public sector who considers themselves transparent and competent, come out, put yourself forward. Say, I am ready in the Ministry of X to do X, Y, Z to make sure that money is matched with people's needs. We need to reform, I'll repeat it, the access to information law. So I have access, John, to what's happening in the cabinet. I don't have access. We have political speeches and lip service commitment for reform. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be very vigilant. I think what this panel shows is that there's not a lack of competence. You know, the four of us are Lebanese. After the disaster, the crime of the century, here we are 70 days later, coming up with solutions, thinking, we're well organized, we're open to collaboration, we have the technology, we've done the math, we have the passion, we have the expertise. The problem is that there's not a central level mediator of people's needs, and we need a central level mediator. We need to scale policy. You cannot fix the problem one business at a time. You may be able to interfere at the micro and fix one or two businesses, but then who's going to scale? So our role is to be vigilant, but as vigilant as we can, because frankly, we're not sleeping. We've been doing this full time. It's not people's job to be paranoid, to be scared. There is talk that there are still explosives stored across town. Does anybody have data about that? What is the plan to get rid of the asbestos in the port? All of these questions fall on deaf ears. So what civil society and citizens can do is to be vigilant as best as we can. But can I promise you today there will be no corruption? No, the establishment has to make that promise to the Lebanese people, to the diaspora, to the international donor community. The IMF 2 days ago, director said, I am ready. We are ready to help Lebanon. Give me a counterpart. There's not a counterpart, and the list of reform goes on. Until then, our only bet is media, is platforms like this, is to be super vigilant and keep our eyes open as long as we're able to be on our own 2 feet.
Thank you. So e-government, e-signature, access to information. Dr. Moubayed, practically, we are October 17 today, 1 year after the first revolution day, the first day of the revolution. Practically, where is the government, what is the government doing in all this? Are we getting there? You already mentioned e-government, you already mentioned access to information, but are we getting there? Is there any hope? Is there any can we visualize something good at the end of this dark tunnel we're living in?
Of course, there is hope. Our political project is hope. This is our political agenda, and we should stick to it because there is no other choice. And this is a call. It's not only, you know, just a naive. The problems are deep-rooted. They are entrenched. We haven't been asking the questions that you are asking right now a few years ago, because we were all kind of sitting in a very comfortable position and dusting under the carpet the many difficulties that we were facing economically, and I'm sure Ishac knows the numbers since 2011, how they have been sliding down. We've been warning from our side about the various darkening horizons coming up and that we were seeing on the indicators. The Institute of Finance produced an interesting report in 2017, and we called it Scary Indicators. So the picture is not gloomy only since October 17. It has been gloomy since the past 5, 6, or 7 years. Let me trace them back to 2011. I think this is the breaking point. Yes, that was done. What can we do now? Well, first of all, we have to be very lucid. And it's a call for lucidity, again. And it's a call for sticking to the principles, of course. Our political choice is to build a state that is equitable, that is transparent, that is accountable, and that is digital. That is that should be Lebanese. That should be like Lebanese, like you, like me, like Ishac. And this is a long process. So meanwhile, we have a very short-term need to help people who are out there without their homes. And this, we have to rely on our strengths, on our solidarity, yes, of course. Investment that we have made in the state should not be lost. This is why we should have very clear picture about the islands of excellence in the state and build on them, because this is the path to do. Build on them, shield them, protect them. Yes, this is the theory of Rosan Vallon, the theory des contre-pouvoirs. We should be, as citizens, engaged in this war for hope. The second, of course, lever, very important, is win back our economy. And I definitely think that this is today the most challenging path to take. Diaspora can help a lot. It can help with money for the short-term rehabilitation, putting back people on their feet, yes, but they need to help with their influence, to influence the political process again, which is now stalled, to put it back. And we have a strong diaspora, so it's a call for them to go back to influencing the political process again. And we need the ideas and the solutions, just like the one you just portrayed. We have talents in finances and in innovative finance that we are not leveraging enough for the economy of the future. We cannot just go with the simple old banking system. We need a totally revamped new ways of doing things there. And we need the money, all sorts of innovative money and money spending to help people get back their access to their own dignity by not only relying on aid, because this aid is great, but dignity is more important. And the third, help them create jobs and help them also find jobs. And this is also the diaspora role here. One very interesting initiative is the Jobs for Lebanon platform, which helped a lot of people, again, gain access to markets of services and of products, helping them export their know-how. So there is a lot to do for all of us, certainly. And in government, let me tell you that there are many people with great talents there. And the government government institutions are at the image of the society also, very polarized. Polarized in terms of competence, but also in terms of political affiliations. And we need to take responsibility over this pact and look beyond it by, again, as I said, putting our efforts to support what we call the contre-pouvoir.
Amazing. I can assure you, I don't know if you're seeing the picture here, but Dr. Geha was super happy with your talk, Dr. Moubayed. So I believe there is something we can build on out of this discussion. You mentioned the diaspora role, and my last question before ending this panel will be to Professor Ishac. What will the diaspora role in linking the aid to create accountability mechanisms and at some point to reach full recovery and maybe potentially at the end of this tunnel some kind of citizenship?
Wow, big question. Look, I mean, it's clear, to repeat my initial argument and link the diaspora to it, that we have Lebanon has fallen from pretty high, an artificial high level of income to very, very low, and is now in a trap, in a hole, with a deep economic, political, and other crises, Beirut, health. We can get lost in this. We could become a failed state. I want to be an optimist. I see a way out. I personally think that within 5 years, we'll be able to stabilize the situation and be on a rising path of better governance and better economy. And in 10 years, we would be much better off. And I think the most important thing in the short term is to oblige the current regime to start fixing the economy a little bit à la Macron, with a technocratic government that the street imposes, that can stabilize the economy to everybody's interest, including the current regime, that will not strengthen the current regime because it's dead. The old Lebanon is dead. The Lebanese have understood that that system has reached its limit and has led them to a catastrophe. Nothing will change that. I think elections will give rise to a very strong opposition that will start playing its role to become a more credible opposition, to make a big difference in the way the country is governed. And at the next election in 6 years, I'm pretty sure that the regime will be completely changed through a natural death. Now, it's in this context that I say Beirut is an important school. We need to learn how to work civil society and the bureaucracy and the state together. We need to, we haven't done that. The past model has relied on receiving rents from abroad, exporting people and not goods, consuming through the state, through cheap imports, getting high interest rates, with the middle class becoming quite rich artificially. Now all this has collapsed and we need to build a new country. The second century of Lebanon will have to be different. Now, in that second century, I think the diaspora will play a very important role, the same way it played in starting the first century in Lebanon. If you remember, the whole Nahda was very influenced by thinkers from the diaspora and also business people and parties. And the diaspora has remained very attached to Lebanon, because it has been fed with new blood in the past 30 years because of our system that exported people. And it's a rich diaspora very attached to its country. The past 20, 30 years have treated the diaspora pretty badly, basically attracting their money with high interest rate. Different diasporas have come for summer, have sent their kids to the marriage market in Lebanon and to perhaps universities, but they haven't really contributed to the evolution of the state. Rather, they have been used and abused. They have received basically all people that were rejected from the country because there was no space for them. the bombing of Beirut has provided a great opportunity to mobilize the diaspora around a project of building, of getting involved and getting on the ground. They send their kids, they send money, they collected money. You know, it was a process of re-empowering these people that feel sometimes partly Lebanese only, that have re-become, especially with the new generation, very involved on the ground and feeling for the country. In the long term, the new Lebanon should be counting on its diaspora to create this productive economy, an economy built on production, on meritocracy, on good governance, on export, not on rents, because those will not come anymore to this country. And there is a great opportunity there which we have to imagine. You know, what is this global Lebanon with 12 million abroad and 3-4 million inside? This is unique. We have to think about, you know, products that can circulate, people that can circulate, skills that can come in to take advantage of a good business climate, the creativity of the people. You know, 10 big companies like Murex in Lebanon would make the country. And there are tens of them in the world. So how to have this relationship where the country, the homeland, benefits its diaspora and the diaspora in turn benefit the country, this remains to be imagined. Now, just to conclude, this first phase was very empowering. The third phase will have to be very dynamic. Again, the second phase, which we talked about in terms of the role of civil society, the state, the private sector, it remains to be imagined in terms of the diaspora. There is a risk that international organization will crowd out the diaspora and will have World Bank money rather than diaspora involvement. So we have to figure out a way for the second phase to empower the diaspora even more, whether it is through the business sector, as Elie described, or through working in parallel to that Beirut Fund, or even working within that Beirut Fund. I think this discussion has not yet started, but is going to be very important to develop.
John? Wow, what a great message of hope.
John?
And Elie,
just if I may rebound on something that Lamia mentioned about that Lebanese people don't need in fact, don't need donation. I fully agree on this point. I believe what Lebanese people need opportunity rather than donation. We have been discussing long time about skills, competences, etc. And we always talk about how Lebanese success and the Lebanese diaspora or Lebanese success are so successful abroad. In fact, I believe that Lebanese are successful abroad because they have access to an equal opportunity. They have access to an opportunity without asking them about their belief, about for whom they vote for. They only give them the opportunity for what they are and for what they can do and how they can perform. And yeah, I fully agree. Let's give our Lebanese people opportunity, and then they can do the rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Geagea. Let's two messages of hope. I will start with Mrs. Moubayed.
Well, I definitely agree with Ishac. Yes, the second phase is the toughest. But then again, this is where the Lebanese endurance has to show up creatively. And I don't know how. I don't know what are the levers. And I don't think any person today probably have the answers. But there is this belief, this fantastic belief that we can do it and that we have enough people around the world that will, Lebanese and friends of Lebanon, who will make us, move in the right direction. And the big, proof to that is the audience right here and this beautiful workshop that gathered so much interest and so little time. I believe the conversation should be going because the conversation also is a pathway to hope. And I'm certainly one of those persons who want to walk this path with great, great confidence.
Thank you so much. Last message of hope with Dr. Geha.
I just want to say thank you so much for Ishac and Lamia and Elie and you and all the organizers. You've been today my the inspiration I needed to leave this room smiling before I go protest. My message is two things, and I want to build on what was said. This first phase of recovery will determine everything else. If we can do this and restore people's sense of dignity and agency, then we can begin to imagine differently, and then we can go to elections and we can fight. My message is for the diaspora, the young, the old, the newly gone student with 100 euros in their pocket, or the rich. Stop talking toxic politics. The conversation, whether you love your Zaim, you love the Thawra, you don't love anybody, look around in any city in the world and ask, why is it that your family, your grandmas and grandfathers and your children and your cousins live in a country where 6 years we've been asking, we want a solution for garbage? Ask, why is it if you're a young woman that you're protected against harassment and violence if you live outside Lebanon, but in Lebanon you are not protected? Ask about banking and transaction. Ask about why is it that we have 6 working currencies right now? Ask the right questions. Don't accept this time that we put things under the rug. We will not accept to put these things under the rug. I am not asking that everybody agrees politically about foreign policy, but surely we can agree about, healing our wounds together so that we can imagine differently. I believe that we can. And I believe that this next phase will determine how to do it. But I think that the revolution in our minds has started. And that one is much more important. And it is not possible to oppress it than the one on the street. So I'll close with what Ishac said. The old system is dead. How long we can live with dead bodies around us is up to us. But we do have a chance to get out of this. And I believe that we can. So thank you so much for inspiring me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So 1 year after the revolution has started, hope is still here. And we're happy to move forward. We're happy to move fast, actually, because the street is waiting for us. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for all the panelists. What an inspiration. Thank you so much. Okay, hello again. Sorry for this technical problem. We thought it was going to end at 4 p.m. Beirut time. Sorry, Dr. Geha had to leave. I will continue with some of your questions. No, okay, we will read them directly. I will read them directly on the screen. Can we go back to the first question? There was a technical question about who's leading Thania Bas? Wow, okay. The first one, okay, here. For Mr. Geagea, is a new parallel banking system a viable alternative? If not, what are the recommendations to recover any form of trust in the banking system? Is this, okay, trust recovery still realistic with the banking systems and policies in place?
Okay, first, no, the objective is not to replace the banking system, but honestly, for the time being, to be pragmatical, in fact, the banking system is not operational, it's not functional, for all the reasons that we all know. So we cannot wait until the full restructuring of the balance sheets or the banks or all to implement all these reform plans, whatever they are. We cannot wait until these reform plans are implemented to find the solution on the short term or the midterm. And these solutions are, as I said, it's not an invention. They are already existing here in everywhere, in fact, in the Western world, in Asia, etc. Of course, they will take part of the traditional financial system, but it doesn't mean they will replace it. But in some sectors, they can do it better than the banks. If I take the example of the microloans, for example, banks are not at all interested in giving microloans up to, I don't know, to 5,000, 10,000, etc. And even if they will do it in a payment facility, it will not be as reactive as that. While these platforms, sometimes they propose a reply within 24 hours, 48 hours, and it's very vital for small businesses to revive the economy. So no, the aim is not to replace the banking system. It's just as a tactical solution, and it might be a strategical solution for the end. Meanwhile, we implement the restructuring in the banking system. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Okay, thanks, Mr. Geagea. My second question to Mrs. Moubayed regarding the e-government. If there are already plans that have been being developed since the 90s, what will it take to actually implement them and move forward? If it exists, what is needed to make it real?
Thank you for this question. Yes, we've been hearing, as Carmen said, talking about e-government for the past maybe 10 or 15 years with many failed attempts. Again, this crisis and what crisis and all what has happened starting COVID started a very interesting move. It's probably not visible to most citizens, but if you go to Twitter and try to follow impact.gov.lb, you'll be really surprised. I guarantee you are surprised. You'll find that we have a platform that is now tracing COVID cases, that is collecting info, that is producing dashboard, and that is evolving to become an inter-municipal tool and also an intergovernmental tool, with many actors today using it to become kind of a workflow system. So eventually, if we keep investing and extending this instrument, it can be I want to be hopeful. It can be something that can beat Estonia. Very little, because it has been built in less than 6 months, by the way, by Lebanese talents with companies very similar or at even the same level as Murex and Lebanese talent. And this platform is owned by the state. So this is something really new that I invite you to watch. The second very interesting also development is that there is an attempt to put more transparency and traceability into aid. And I think this is key for the next phases. Another platform, you can also find it on Twitter, and I really invite you to follow it. It's called the Donor Coordination Platform. It is building up pretty quickly. We have more than 84 donors now working on this platform. It is a Lebanese platform built by the government, and with an attempt, with a view to go a little bit more far, and that it could even trace and match need and distribution. Again, the implementation depends on what kind of capacity we have in government. And as you know today, even the good islands inside this whole structure are finding lots of difficulties in operation with the hyperinflation and with the loss of budgets and very, very limited budgets. So this is why the call was like to find a way to sustain them. For you also to be informed, there has been a wonderful work done on digitizing the budget and providing citizens with access to budget data. And very soon, even the expenditures will be there. It's available on the website, on the platform of the Institute of Finance. It is called Citizen Budgets, and you can go and find out and dig into all the numbers that were until today completely occulted and completely obscure to the citizens. Why am I talking about that? Because these kind of platforms today bring us to the next phase, which is policy making, evidence-based policy making. And if we're into walking this path of sustainability for future sustainable recovery, we need to build on evidence, and Carmen brought it many times. We need data. We need to put our minds into analyzing and devising and designing innovative solutions for our country, and this is a very good base.
Thank you. I have one interesting question. OK. Nous voyons beaucoup de tels événements avec de belles idées et bonnes intentions. C'est super, mais malheureusement, derrière, il ne se passe jamais rien. Please ask every panelist, what is the one idea you are willing to commit your personal time on, and would you be willing to work on it with us, diaspora, starting next week? Okay, it's not a Miss Lebanon question, but I will start with Mr. Geagea. What is the one idea that you have now in mind, Khalas, that you can start actively working on with the diaspora starting next week?
Well, the bad and the good news is that I'm not working on only one single idea. We are working, in fact, on different ideas. If you want me to pick, I won't pick because all the initiatives are interesting. And but what I want to reply is that a lot of bad things are happening in Lebanon, but what is the beauty out of it? If whenever you start working or trying to help, you can find a lot of many young, talented people who are ready, who are moving, who are willing, who are thinking about new ideas and new initiatives. So the person who's asking the question, you can give her our details. I will let her to pick whatever subject we discussed on this panel. If it is about one of the topics that I mentioned, I'm 100% ready to continue. And this is what we're doing. In fact, we're not talking about theoretical stuff. On the first topic I presented, I'm not working on it personally, but on the second one, I'm working on it personally.
Okay, thank you. Professor Diwan.
What, same question?
Yeah, same question. Like we were asked to ask the same question for the three panelists.
Okay. I mean, this is probably somebody in Lebanon that's asking this question. You probably don't realize, but the diaspora is as mobilized as you are. And for many of us, being Lebanese has become more than a full-time job. And like Elie, I'm involved in too many things to be able to choose one child. But if there's something that I want to try to personally bring to the process is more hope, more positivity, building around the many islands of qualities that still exist in the Sawra, in the institutions, in civil society, the Basil Flayhan centers that exist, to perhaps using the fact that we're a bit far from the ground. We have digested the losses and the deaths of the system a little bit more than that you're living this misery every day, to try to inject hope and dynamism to the various initiatives that are ongoing that I think will lead us to a much better place.
Thanks. Mrs. Moubayed, same question.
Well, as Ishac and Elie quite said, we're all, each in his own, life, professional and personal, involved in actual, very hands-on initiatives and juggling multi-initiatives at the same time. But sometimes, when you're on the lines of fire, it's very hard to see. So I've talked about the various initiatives that I'm involved personally and also as Institute of Finance Basil Flayhan. But I invite also all those willing to join hands and also those who would like to see another face of the state or see actually the face of the state that they would like to see in maybe 5 years. Completely generalized, to pass by the Institute of Finance and volunteer or be part of an initiative we're taking. We take also interns, so do pass by us. Yes. And if we can help putting your very good ideas and energy into use, be sure we will do that.
Last question it's kind of it will continue the same on the same topic actually. How can we rebuild the trust, and how the diaspora will reinvest in Lebanon where the banking system is crashing? خلاص, هيدي last question for you, Mrs. Moubayed.
Well, I think this is a question that and somehow has been more or less tackled. But as Ishac said, and Elie, everybody is mobilized. Every Lebanese now has a probably not sleeping, you know, doing all what he can do. Trust is a process. By being positive, by looking at the positive, we can help reshape our vision of trust. Building blocks, lucidity, working on data and data transparency in all sorts of fields. Also learning to learn what is our country. And allow me just to open a bracket and say that we talk a lot about the rhetorics, about the nation, about Lebanon, but we have very, very shallow knowledge of how it functions really in terms of institutions, and how it functions in terms of decentralized operation, in terms of municipality. And we've been disengaged, hiding away from the system for so long. Like, I don't want to deal with the government if the government doesn't touch me. So I don't want to go to any institutions, provided they don't, you know, call me. But then again, if you're not engaged, if you're not part of the governance conversation, how can you build the governance? How can you build a good governance? How can you be a citizen? So I think it's a learning path for all of us, getting away from this rhetoric of distrust and start getting engaged in public life. Like Carmen said, pose the right questions and build. And I think by doing that and finding the lights inside this whole mess, trust will be regained.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm actually happy we got this additional Q&A session. It gave us hope, even another layer of hope, additional to the hope that you already got in the first session. So thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. This time for real. Thank you so much. This is the end of this panel. Thanks a lot. Ciao. Bye-bye.